Hello students, this is Dr. Newmark and this is your highlights video for week 2. So there are several themes from Carol Barnum's 2 chapters that you read for this week that I want to highlight. So I'm going to read some of the content on these slides, but I'm also going to share the link to the Google slide deck in the comments for this video so you can go in and read them yourself. So what does it mean that people are goal-oriented? And what are the results of this orientation? And what I mean by this is if people are goal-oriented, what is it that they want to accomplish when they encounter a new product or a new user interface or something like that? So second question is, do you know what a schema is? Based on your readings for this week, you should know what it is. And have you ever used one when applying no knowledge for using one product to using a new one? I always think that when I get a new smartphone, I'm using that kind of knowledge to help me quickly adapt to my new piece of technology based on the skills that I had from my old one. So going forward, how does your knowledge of a typical for you websites design guide your use of other websites? For example, if you use Amazon frequently for shopping, how would that knowledge help you to learn to shop on a different website? What things do you look for on the Amazon website? And do you know how to navigate it? And how does that knowledge of navigation transfer to other websites? Next, are there any generational differences that you can think of that impact how people use the web or different apps? And how should knowledge of these generational differences guide web design? Your book talks about that, I think, in a pretty thoughtful way, so be sure that you picked up on that. Next up is the theme of personae, or the singular is persona. So how do you create one and why? And how and when would you use one? So here's an image on the screen of one that I pulled from a site that has aggregated several good examples, visually engaging examples of personae that are used in usability testing in various industries. So I want to ask next, what is the relationship between a persona and a scenario? So be sure that you can figure that out. So as related to the scenarios you create, your book asks a pretty basic question. So what is the difference between a task and a goal? So these are some of the key definitions that your book covers. But if you, coming back to the persona that's on the screen for Nerdy Nina, look at how well designed this is, and this will touch on some of the concepts from the Williams book that I'll get to at the end of this video. But certain elemental aspects of this prospective user of a product or prospective consumer are covered in this simply designed screen. So this helps people doing product design, interface design, help learn so much about the people that they are targeting as their prospective users. Next up, I want you to think about goal setting for usability test. So Barnum explores this concept using terms from Whitney Quisenberry. They are the 5 E's, or the 5 dimensions of usability: efficient, effective, engaging, error tolerant, and easy to learn. So I want you to think about also how designing with these in mind helps you attend to concerns regarding accessibility. And your book has several pages dedicated to accessibility. So we need to design for accessibility to make sure all of our users, whether they have visible or invisible disabilities or differences in ability, are able to use the products, the interfaces, and the designs we create. Now, sometimes businesses bristle a bit at building in the financial support to test for accessibility, but your book talks about how you make a quote-unquote business case for it. So how does usability fit into agile development processes as used in many companies? For example, my husband is a software engineer for a bank, and they use agile methodologies for their software sprints. So think about how in a company like that, usability testing would fit into that framework. And your book describes what an agile development process looks like. So I'm going to come back in the next slide, which is very text dense, not necessarily well designed, but if you come back to it in the slide deck, there's a lot for you to read here. This was not from your book. I went directly to Whitney Quisenberry's website, and I've pulled this language from her, and the link is in the comments section, the additional information section of this YouTube video. So Whitney Quisenberry explains that the 5 E's are helpful in planning your usability testing because each of these E's suggests a specific technique. I want you to go back and read through this. I'm not going to read it to you in this video, but please go back and add more dimension to the knowledge that Barnum introduced you to in the book by reading this additional information. So I already covered this in a previous slide, so I'm sorry I didn't take this out, but I'm just going to skip ahead to these last questions. So concerning Barnum. So how do you screen participants, incentivize their participation, and develop scenarios for them to follow during a test? So the last thing I'll say about these chapters is Chapter 5 is crazy dense. I recommend you come back to it a few times this semester. You will have to use so much of this information when you do your group usability test, which takes up the second half of our semester. So you're getting sort of overwhelming amounts of information right now. Don't worry if not all of it is sticking to you. At this point, you'll be able to come back to it. So let's talk about the non-designer's design book. You read chapters 1 through 6 for this week, and it's very readable, and the book itself is very well designed, which is one reason why it's so popular and has won so many awards. So Williams uses this concept, which is very powerful, that relates to how empowered you will be once you know some of the principles of good design. The quote is, "Once you can name something, you're conscious of it. You have power over it. You're in control. You own it." So 4 concepts that he uses from the introduction and then throughout the chapters that you read are these: contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. These are some of the principles of design. If you know more from an art class or a design class, that's great, but these are the 4 foundational ones that I want you to think about. We also talk about these in my visual rhetoric class, but here we're going to think about them as it relates to document design, interface design, web design, and product design. So I want you to test your initial knowledge of these concepts. Why is this design knowledge important for someone who is concerned with document and information design and the testing of user-facing content? So do a test for me. So find a leaflet, a brochure, an instructions document, a business card, or a direct mailer, like a postcard from a business, that you have lying around. To the right is one that I happen to have handy. This came with my daughter's new passport, which we got renewed in the last year, and I just stuck it on the side of my desk, as I do with many examples like this, so I can share it with my students. So I want you to pause the video, as I'll say again in the next slide, and look at this carefully if you can. So I repeat, here are the terms that we are thinking about: contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. So as I said, pause the video and go back a little bit to the Department of State leaflet that I shared. Using some of the ideas from Williams, how are these attributes reflected in the design of the leaflet and in the example that you chose for yourself? Seriously, I want you to spend some time thinking about this. It will help you apply the knowledge that you developed by reading Williams and apply it to other kinds of materials, the sorts that are circulated to citizens, like by the Department of State, by companies that create consumer products, and more. So probably you have some business cards, a letterhead, a postcard that was sent to you by a business advertising their services lying around at your house. Please take a look at them as I suggested. And thanks for watching this video, and I will see you in a future video coming in the coming week.